Hello friends! Previously on the channel, we covered diesel two-wheeled vehicles, motorcycles with rotary engines, and machines with a 2x2 wheel formula. And while thinking in my free time about what interesting topic to share with you, it struck me. Tracked motorcycles. And really, the topic is extremely interesting, but not very well covered. Let's fix that. So, make yourself comfortable in front of your gadget's screen. I invite you to hear a few words about tracked motorcycles. Enjoy watching. As is known, the right of priority for the invention of the tracked drive is disputed by different countries. In Russia, it is believed that the first inventor of the track was the peasant Fedor Blinov. In the United States of America, it is commonly believed that it was some Best and Holt who founded the Caterpillar company and assembled the first tracked bulldozer. In France, the engineer Dubois secured the right to create vehicles with movable rail tracks in the year 1818. That's why the French consider him the pioneer of the tracked movement principle. In the year 1826, the Englishman George Cayley patented the endless track and published an article about it in a journal. In the year 1837, another Russian inventor, Zagryazhsky, patented a wagon with endless rails. But still, most experts believe that the real tracked vehicle appeared in 1901, when the American Elvin Orlando Lombard built the first serial production machine on tracks, which was manufactured until 1917. Be that as it may, the invention of the tracked drive quickly found application in self-propelled machinery, from tractors to tanks. Thanks to the tracked drive, this machinery develops greater tractive effort while maintaining fairly high maneuverability and exerting relatively low pressure on the ground. Let's go back to the times of the First World War. Tanks with tracked drives proved their effectiveness as a class of machinery. Motorcycles also gained popularity as a good alternative to horses. However, in combat conditions, wheeled vehicles like light trucks or motorcycles were at a significant disadvantage off-road. The idea of improving a motorcycle's off-road capability by equipping it with a half-track drive emerged almost simultaneously with the spread of half-track vehicles in the late 1920s and reached its peak popularity in the 1930s. Projects for half-track motorcycles, primarily for military purposes, were actively developed in Great Britain and other countries. The development of the idea of a compact all-terrain vehicle conditionally went in two directions. In the first case, a single track was used. In the second, the front and rear modules were autonomous. Each approach had its own advantages and disadvantages. Nevertheless, all pre-war projects of such machines were, at best, only brought to the stage of creating prototypes and conducting mobility tests. And none of them were produced in series. I'll list the most well-known ones. Here is perhaps one of the first. The motorcycle called Rodels was designed in the mid-1920s in Great Britain and was based on one of the Douglas models. A little later, in 1927, a prototype of the RASC Triumph half-track motorcycle was introduced, which had 3 wheels in its design. A track was fitted over the 2 rear wheels, which significantly improved the vehicle's off-road capability. This original 3-wheeled motorcycle with a 3x2 drive was created in 1926 based on the Piazza model. It was modified from a regular one by order of the Royal Army and made as a single copy. It is unknown how it performed during the tests, but it can be assumed that its off-road capabilities were decent. It is currently kept in the British Army Transport Museum. In 1928, the guys from Osborne Engineering Company took a similar approach and created several prototypes of half-track motorcycles with the option to remove the tracks from the wheels. Notice in the photo the track is attached to the luggage rack. The machines were offered to the army and private buyers. The company was already ready to sell such motorcycles. This advertising poster lists prices for models with 350cc, 500cc and 750cc engines with prepayment options. But no one was interested in the project and it fell through. In this photo you can see the Italian prototype of a half-track motorcycle called Na during field tests near Rome in 1931. And here is an image of its civilian version on the cover of a magazine. The worthy successor to the tractor cycle idea today is, but we'll talk about it a little later. The next machine comes from Germany, a 3-seater tracked motorcycle with a 3-to-2 engine, produced in Nuremberg in the 1930s. The machine was based on an opposed Model 6 with an engine displacement of 596 cubic centimeters and a power output of 18 horsepower. Let's move to the Soviet Union. One of the first tracked motorcycle projects was created at the Design and Production Bureau of the Red Army, which was headed by Pavel Ignatievich Krokovsky. He was known primarily as a popularizer and developer of gliders, parachute and airborne equipment. Here, for example, are aerosleds of his design. In the early 1930s, Krokovsky presented an original design for an armored motorcycle with a half-track chassis. The driver could observe the surrounding area through narrow openings in the turret and fire the DT machine gun. The rear drive, consisting of a track and 2 side stabilizing wheels, allowed it to overcome difficult terrain. The project was thoroughly developed but was rejected at the development stage. However, work in this direction continued in the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics in the years 1937 to 38. At NAMI, scientific research was conducted on the development of tracked motorcycles. The work was classified as top secret and was carried out in the city of Kubinka. As a transport vehicle, the serial Trista motorcycle was chosen. It was powered by the rear wheel, which rotated a drum that set 2 rubber metal tracks in motion. The tests revealed numerous shortcomings of the bulky design, which lacked maneuverability, reliability, and the power of the base motorcycle. The track design was further improved, and in the summer of 1940, the modified device was installed on a more powerful motorcycle, the Vosim. The tests were conducted in September to October of 1940, with the same unsatisfactory result. Unstable and uncontrollable, this put an end to the idea of a tracked motorcycle. Let's move to France, July 31st, 1931. André Maginot, the French Minister of War, requested René Gillet, a leading motorcycle manufacturer, to test off-road motorcycles. The machine was built at the request of the Ministry of Defense back in 1933 and was worthy of the title Frankenstein's Monster. The monster with 3 tracks, which replaced the wheels, weighed 600 kilograms. General Bully, realizing the impracticality of such a design, requested changes on December 13, 1933. The company presented a second prototype. It was a motorcycle with a sidecar, featuring a Type I engine and a track module instead of a rear wheel. However, this vehicle was plagued by constant failures, such as frequent part breakages and engine overheating. The project was closed. In the second half of the 1930s, 2 more tracked motorcycles were presented to the Army Command. In April of 1935 appeared. Designed by Henry Dresham, he used an engine of his own design with a displacement of 1 liter. The tracks were made of rubber, and turning was accomplished by braking one of the tracks. The machine, weighing 503 kilograms, consumed 12 times more fuel than the 750 cubic centimeter Terrat motorcycle. The vehicle did not go into production. The second tracked motorcycle was presented by the Swiss inventor Adrien Mercier. The factory of the same name was located in France and produced 50 cubic mopeds with engines, as well as 125 and 175 cubic motorcycles with French engines. Starting from 1932, Mercier worked on the development of tracked motorcycles in the small French town of Bois-Colombes. The military conducted the first test of the Swiss engineer's design. On February 9, 1937, in a hilly area with a steep incline of up to 27 degrees. The motorcycle was equipped with a 350cc 10 horsepower engine, which allowed it to comfortably travel at speeds of up to 65 km per hour. Additional cooling of the cylinder head was provided by a fan with a forced drive from the engine. The motorcycles were equipped with a 3-speed gearbox made by a French company, with manual gear shifting. A prototype had an armored shield installed at the front, which ultimately caused the motorcycle to get stuck in the mud and stop moving. The tests of the improved prototype number 2 began on May 9, 1939. But at the start, the machine lost several rubber pads, and the tests resumed only on July 4th. In the new test, Mersey had to compete with the standard Army motorcycle Sevitaim. On the route, which consisted of 147 kilometers of bad roads, Sevitaim showed a higher average speed, 75 kilometers per hour compared to 66. Mersey's off-road capability turned out to be much higher, but the fuel consumption reached 17.6 liters per 100 kilometers compared to 10 liters for Sevitaim. An insurmountable obstacle for the tracked motorcycle turned out to be a ditch 1 meter and 20 centimeters deep filled with mud. The track got stuck while the lightweight Sevitaim crossed the ford easily. Despite these problems, the military recommended the production of the tracked motorcycle with a 540 engine. But Adrien Mercier refused to produce a third prototype because, according to him, he had spent a lot of energy and money. And on July 27, 1939, the project of the tracked motorcycle Mercier was closed. The tracked motorcycle of the French designer Loutre was offered to the military in 1938. The vehicle was intended for use in off-road conditions and heavily rugged terrain as a replacement for the regular motorcycles that were then in service with the French army. According to the designer's idea, the motorcycle equipped with tracks was supposed to easily traverse off-road areas where a regular motorcycle could not pass. Moreover, the Loutre all-terrain motorcycle was covered with light armor, which was mainly intended to protect the vehicle itself from damage during falls and collisions with obstacles. It can also be assumed that the motorcyclist could take cover behind the motorcycle from small arms fire. The Loutre motorcycle turned using a rubber metal track, which could bend in both directions. The principle of an articulated frame was used, but the motorcycle's stability during turns seemed insufficient. Then a second prototype was developed, which had 2 additional side wheels installed, similar to children's bicycles, except they were mounted at the front. Besides, holding such a motor all-terrain vehicle weighing 414 kilograms was probably not easy. The maximum speed of the motorcycle reached 40 kilometers per hour, with an engine displacement of 500 cubic centimeters. The engine power and fuel consumption are unknown. The tracked motorcycle was tested in the French army and received the most negative reviews. The conclusion of the Special Commission on the testing of Loutre turned out to be quite unexpected for the inventor. In the conclusion of the army testers, it was stated that the machine was too heavy, unwieldy, and its cross-country ability was actually worse than that of a traditional wheeled motorcycle. In 1936, specifically by order of the Wehrmacht, a single example of the BMW Spezial TR500 Schneekrat was created based on the BMW R12 model. At that time, the Wehrmacht army needed light, all-terrain vehicles for conducting combat operations in European countries, and for this purpose, the military spared no expense, providing orders to various design bureaus. It was precisely that period that was marked by all sorts of modifications of tracked motor vehicles created for German infantry. All tracked motorcycles, without exception, had a complex and therefore impractical design. They turned out to be heavy and unwieldy. Schneekrat was the same way. The prototype of this tracked all-terrain motorcycle was a snow removal machine built by the same engineer, who used an engine from a motorcycle and a track from a tank. The track had 2 support rollers at the bottom and several tension rollers at the top. It was driven by the rear drive wheel of the motorcycle. As you can see in the diagram, all the motorcycle's mechanisms were located inside the track. In addition, the tracked all-terrain motorcycle could quickly be converted into a snowmobile. To do this, the designer provided for the installation of a ski on the wheel of the motorcycle sidecar. And now we've reached the period of World War II and the first mass-produced tracked motorcycle. By a military order that the company received in 1940, a half-track tractor appeared. Such an artillery tractor of the motorcycle type was originally developed for mountain troops and paratroopers. The manufacturer was also tasked with creating an all-terrain transport vehicle that could be transported in a Junkers Ju-52 9.84 feet airplane. One of the main developers was the creator of the running gear for the Panther and Tiger tanks. The motorcycle all-terrain vehicle received a running gear with a staggered arrangement of rollers, which was the designer's own development. The all-terrain vehicle was controlled both by the front wheel and for maneuvering in confined spaces by advancing one of the tracks. The Kettenkrad half-track motorcycle was designed to carry 3 people, including the driver. Its total payload capacity was 325 kilograms, but in addition, the motor all-terrain vehicle could tow heavy loads behind it on a hitch. The vehicle was equipped with an engine with a displacement of 1.59 quarts and a power output of 36 horsepower, which allowed it to reach a maximum speed of up to 80 kilometers per hour. The vehicle demonstrated excellent off-road capability, which combined with its compact dimensions, power and high-quality speed characteristics was a key factor for mountain rangers and parachute saboteurs. In addition to the basic version, 2 more modifications of all-terrain motorcycles were developed and produced specifically for laying electrical cables and communication cables. The first 142 units of the Kettenkrad tracked motorcycles were produced as early as 1940, and their debut took place a few months later. During the landing of the German paratroopers on the island of Crete in May 1941, for the first 3 years, the army tractors were produced in small batches, but by 1943 their production had reached 2,500 units. A total of 9,420 tracked motorcycles were produced, of which 1,300 units were accounted for by the company. By the middle of World War II, Kettenkrad motorcycles had been adopted by the Wehrmacht, and they were also often used as light tractors at military airfields. After the end of the war, about 550 more Kettenkrads were assembled in the factory buildings of the enterprise, but this time for use in agricultural work as mini-tractors. The production of tracked all-terrain motorcycles was finally completed only in 1949. It was at that time that the French company Babioli, moving the controls back and removing the front wheel, converted some of the vehicles into regular civilian tractors. The NSU Kettenkrad merits a more in-depth review. If interested, share your thoughts in the comments. Despite the difficult wartime situation, in 1943 the designers returned to the idea of a tracked motorcycle. At that time the Soviet Union already had a sufficient number of captured Kettenkrads. However, the designers from Irbit did not give in to the temptation to copy the enemy's machine. The Kettenkrad became only a starting point for their own creation, which did not resemble the NSU. Experimental design work was carried out in the winter of 1943 to 1944. In the surviving working documents of the factory in Irbit, the prototype was referred to as a tracked motorcycle. Unlike the German design, this was a purely tracked vehicle, shorter and much lighter. The designers tried to make maximum use of existing serial components. As a power unit, a motorcycle engine M72 was used, which turned out to be sufficient for equipment weighing just over half a ton. The motorcycle's front fork with the wheel was removed, which made it possible to place the engine, gearbox and fuel tank in the front part of the body, leaving enough space in the cabin for a fairly comfortable position for the driver and passenger. The original track chassis was completely manufactured in-house. The engineers managed to develop a compact and maneuverable vehicle that could successfully be converted into a light military tractor. Unfortunately, things turned out differently. The field tests, which began on February 12, 1944, ended after the first kilometer. The gear teeth broke. Main transmission. As a result, the project did not continue and was lost in the archives. The post-war period was not so rich in tracked motorcycles. Practice showed the low viability of these designs. As it turned out, light-wheeled motorcycles did not particularly lose out in terms of off-road capability. One of the main problems of all half-track motorcycles was stabilizing the vertical position at low and high speeds when moving over rough terrain. Gyro transport systems from the United States of America tried to solve this problem by using gyroscopic stabilization. But even this revolutionary solution did not boost the popularity of tractor cycles among the masses. Tuscan, an experimental American half-track motorcycle, was produced as a single unit in 1965 by order of the United States Forest Service for Rangers. Its engine, with a power of 20 horsepower, allowed it to climb slopes as steep as 45 degrees. Gyroscope balancing allowed it not to fear tipping over while moving. Instead of a front wheel, skis could be installed. The Tuscan was equipped with a 15-liter tank and could carry 200 kilograms. The maximum speed was 72 kilometers per hour. The vehicle was offered to private individuals with a down payment of $400, but it did not generate any interest. At the end of the 1950s, the Italian general Ferruccio Garbari came up with the idea to replace the traditional mules used by the Alpini, the Italian mountain troops, with a mechanical means of transportation. To help solve this difficult issue, it was decided to turn to Moto Guzzi, the famous Italian motorcycle manufacturer, with whom the army already had a good working relationship. Moto Guzzi assigned the project to one of its most talented engineers, Giulio Carcano, and in 1959 he began working on it. In March 1960, a prototype of the tricycle was presented at the Geneva Motor Show. This was followed by another year of testing and refinements. And finally, in 1961, a contract was signed for the delivery of 500 motorcycles under the name. Initially, it was planned to install a 500cc single-cylinder engine on the tricycle, which was also used in another famous tricycle, the 5032 Motocarro Militaria. However, this engine turned out to be insufficiently powerful, so a completely new V-shaped engine with a displacement of 750 cubic centimeters was developed, which received the name in honor of its creator. The 20 horsepower engine allowed the vehicle, weighing a ton, to accelerate up to 50 kilometers per hour and carry up to 500 kilograms of cargo. The basis of the tricycle was a double tubular frame across which the engine was mounted. The front suspension was on cylindrical springs, while the rear wheels were suspended on longitudinal rods with rubber springs, which could be extended and retracted on the move, changing the track width from 800 to 1,300 millimeters. To increase its off-road capability, the tricycle had two special levers with small wheels on the rear axles, onto which metal tracks could be fitted when necessary. This device also increased the maximum climbable slope from 27 to 31 degrees. The Mueller mechanic had permanent drive to all three wheels, a 6-speed gearbox, reverse gear, a disconnectable differential between the front wheel and the rear axle, and a disconnectable differential on the rear axle. The mechanical mule failed to meet expectations in practical use. Managing the repair of such a complex machine required advanced technical knowledge and consequently more qualified personnel. Thus, the operating costs increased. The second main complaint of the military was insufficient safety. As a result of the aforementioned complexity of control, several drivers died in tricycle rollovers. Thus, in 1963 production was discontinued, although it remained in service until the 1970s. A total of about 200 units were produced. Now before you is a Swedish track motorcycle for traveling on snow, called, which was produced from the 1960s to the 1980s in Östersund. For normal movement and control of the vehicle, the driver had to use skis. The design turned out to be compact and light enough to fit in a car. Two Larvin motorcycles were used in a dramatic chase scene in the 1979 film Bear Island. The next machine also comes from Italy. The Alpine scooter, a kind of snowmobile from the company, was created in 1975, and this happened thanks to Renata Ceparo, who undertook an expedition to Antarctica in order to explain to the Italian government the necessity of Italy joining the Antarctic Treaty, which was signed in Washington. December 1st, 1959. This device was originally created for this expedition. In the future, the Alpine scooter was supplied to the Alpini, the oldest active mountain infantry corps in the world, as well as to various mountain rescue services. The trailer equipment set includes a front ski, a sled, a stretcher on skis, a track for ground, and a track for ice. Early models used a 200cc engine. On the later models, 250 and 300cc engines were used. In 1986, Verbitia returned to the tracked theme. The 43-kilogram drive unit was tested on 3 models. Tests showed that on deep snow the track slipped and the motorcycle sank. Movement only on hard-packed snow did not satisfy the testers. Only one photograph of this prototype has survived. At the end of the 2000s, an American company, in collaboration with a Swiss company, developed the XT-ATV half-track all-terrain vehicle tricycle, which looks more like a snowmobile on steroids with wheels instead of skis. The tracked all-terrain vehicle, developed by Swiss engineers, is designed to travel over any type of terrain in the most extreme climatic conditions, from -50 to +60 degrees. And it is used by various rapid reaction units of the armed forces around the world, so that soldiers can reach their destination directly and much faster. The engine, with a capacity of 1,200 cubic centimeters, allows it to accelerate from a standstill to 100 in about 3 seconds and reach a maximum speed of 185 kilometers per hour. It can carry a payload of up to 350 kilograms. It is equipped with an efficient cooling system that supports the operation of the power unit in tropical or desert climate conditions. The engine is equipped with 5mm bulletproof protection. A fully fueled all-terrain vehicle has a range of 250 to 201 miles depending on the type of terrain and speed. It has been tested and certified to meet the requirements for civilian self-propelled vehicles and can be used on public roads. The vehicle class is equivalent to quad bikes. Among the options on the all-terrain vehicle are an electric winch, an infrared headlight, a night vision system, and global positioning system navigation. The main consumers have become the countries of the Middle East and some African states. And the company's trade group from Ras Al Khaimah in the United Arab Emirates has already started producing an armored version of the all-terrain vehicle. And here in these shots is a modern interpretation of the Luther motorcycle with a breakable frame. The Hyanite concept was created by German designers Oliver Keller and Tilman Schlutz exclusively for the Michelin Challenge Design Competition in 2006. The machine has a 60 horsepower 500 engine with a maximum speed of 85 miles per hour. According to the idea of the German designers, Hyanite is supposed to combine the maneuverability and high speed of a motorcycle with the off-road capability of a snowmobile or a small tractor. But at the moment, Hyanite exists only as a scaled-down model, and the authors of the project are not planning to bring a working version of the vehicle to the market yet. Over time, the concept of the tracked motorcycle was revised multiple times. Today, it's clear that a tracked Frankenstein weighing nearly a ton is neither needed nor effective on the battlefield. There is much more suitable equipment for conquering off-road terrain. A lot has been invented for civilian purposes as well. In the civilian sector, the most in demand is the tracked motorcycle. Among them are factory-made ones, the so-called snow bikes, which are converted from motocross and hard enduro bikes by installing a tracked drive in place of the swing arm and a ski in place of the front wheel. And various types of motor toboggans, like the Swedish Larven. Tracked vehicles for moving over all types of surfaces are less common. A fairly large percentage of modern tracked motorcycles are created by enthusiasts. Here, for example, is a design by Grigory Gumenov from Ukraine called Tsivar 2 or this tracked all-terrain motorcycle called Komyak, designed by Eduard Luzianin. We shouldn't forget that the world doesn't stand still, and scientific and technological progress provides humanity with both new materials with unique properties and new technologies. This brings my story to an end. To sum up, I'll say the following. I'm not a historian, and I didn't know about half of all this until I started working with the material and editing the story. I hope I managed to present this story to you in an interesting way. Now it's up to you, Fate. The video is in your hands. Support by watching, sharing and liking, or leave it unnoticed. Thank you. This was Krasmota channel with you. See you next time.